think we need to abandon the idea of leaving.
I do have to apologize for lying about the exit.
We are literally in hell right now! Hell!
The Soma Theory. It's by far the most popular one amongst Digital Circus fans. Named after the video game, the idea is that everyone who's trapped in the circus can never leave because they aren't really the humans they think they are. They're clones, digital copies of human minds. The real deals just put on a headset, got their brain scanned, took the headset off, and then went about their lives. Now, for the longest time, I actually hated this theory, for reasons I'll explain later. But after investing in multiple lore tunes over the years, where the biggest theories were pretty much always the correct one, I slowly came around to accepting it. Lo and behold, numerous details and a line of dialogue from Kane in episode 8 practically confirm that yes, the circus gang are avatars based off their original human counterparts, containing their digitized consciousness. Also, rip Kane, you kinda had it coming, but I still hate to see you go. However, that whole trauma barrage sequence made me realize something that I already started to pick up on last episode with Jax's anxiety over accepting that all of this is real and that he might actually have to return to the real world, even though he likely has nothing to worry about because he's never leaving the circus. Kinger aside, everyone's trauma seems to involve them suffering from not only psychological harm, but physical harm, particularly those that involve head trauma or some sort of brain injury. Coupled with what we know about Scratch and the onus he grappled with, I'm confident in saying that the final twist of Digital Circus won't just be that they're copies, it'll be that their human counterparts are already dead. They can't get back to the Macroverse, even if they tried, because there's no bodies to return to. And I know that sounds like a theory that exists solely to be dark, edgy, and shocking, but the show just abruptly cut off its mascot in the midst of a crashout and defeated the horrors of demonetization, so just let me cook, okay? Sit back and put on your tinfoil jester hats, because I'm gonna break down why there's no escape from the Digital Circus when you're already dead. The best place to start unpacking this theory is the brain scans, the reason why our virtual ensemble exists in the first place, and the reason why there's likely no path back to the real world. For the diehard Digital Circus fans, I know you're already up to speed on all the details that revealed the fandom was right on the money with the Soma or digital copy theory, but let's still recap and lay everything out on the table for people who watch these episodes once and move on with their lives. Judging by the arrivals of Pomni and Ragatha, the final moment in the real world anyone recalls before spawning into the circus is putting on a headset, which we'll dive into in a little bit, as I feel like its design is actually a dead giveaway that the homies are, well, dead. It's typical for the digitized to try and take off the headset before realizing it's impossible. Despite retaining autonomy in their virtual bodies, they're completely disconnected from their physical ones, almost as if they've become something else entirely, contesting the idea that the humans are still hooked up to their headsets, Sword Art Online style, especially since Kinger's been in the circus since the 90s. Now, I rolled with this idea when Digital Circus started because, well, I watched Sword Art Online back in the day, so it just made sense to me. Kirito was on life support, why can't Jax be? But I can't deny that the end of episode 1 showing the real world computer running in an empty office with a headset on the desk absolutely implies that no one's actually sitting at the computer, zoned out and plugged into the circus. Instead, it supports another idea, that when people put on one of these headsets, their brains are scanned, personality, memories, quirks, and all, and that data is used to create artificial consciousness, which are the main cast of characters we know and love, those that identify as human, because they are still human.
Debatable.
Just like the thing! Soma? More like some video game that I haven't played, but I'm sure it's really good. I just want to be honest, I don't know why I sounded smug like that. However, what if I told you it's also like Adventure Time with Finn's mom, Minerva? Someone who surrendered her physical body in favor of becoming a digital consciousness. A process that, as seen in Fiona and Cake, needs to kill the subject in order to upload their mind as data. A fate that almost fell upon Finn after he was poisoned by the heart of the forest. That detail is vital for this comparison. Stick with me. Episode 8, or seems to provide irrefutable evidence that they're all copies, as opposed to like a James Cameron Avatar situation.
This is nothing like Avatar!
The first tell is during Kane's vent session, talking about all of his hard work with the circus. Circus. He describes what I can only assume is the circus's equivalent of a character creator, a program that gives everyone their physical forms. And the verbiage he uses for the humans really sticks out.
I made a program that creates a body perfectly encapsulating their mind files, and they hate those too!
Mind files? As in a collection of data based on their minds instead of the real deals? I know to some that may sound like a drastic and biased conclusion to jump towards, but let me remind you, I was against this theory until very recently. It's just that from a writing standpoint, specifying file really stood out to me, and I don't think it's just Kane himself being hyper-specific because bro's an AI. Now let me get this out the way. Yes, files can be live-fed information and updated in real time. That technology was already around by the time the circus was created in the 90s. It's not improbable that these files are being constantly fed up-to-date information from the humans' brains in the real world. However, I don't think that's really the case, because when programs and files get updated with new information, they usually have to refresh or reboot, right? You can't update an app without closing it, you dig? Yet, when would that even happen for the characters? It's not like we see them buffer or respawn, and furthermore, you'd think if their mind files were being routinely updated, then they'd have to sleep so their bodies and mind files would be on the same page, right? Yet we know they don't need to sleep. They don't need to eat. So I just don't think it tracks that their mind files are being updated to accommodate real-time, real-world brain scans. Especially since this is Kane patting himself on the back for his efforts while lamenting that he's underappreciated, basically saying that these bodies are perfectly compatible with their minds. So I can't help but wonder, if their mind files are updated to accommodate changes in their real-life brains, then wouldn't their designs change as their characters develop or regress? Now, of course, the irony is that they all hate their bodies because it embodies their various struggles, traumas, and hangups. But also, no one's completed their arc yet, so it's hard to say this wouldn't happen in the finale. Still, given how their designs reflect their personalities and hardships, I feel like the slightest change in any of those aspects would warrant an updated body to accompany their updated mind file, if an actual human brain was piloting them. For a simple example that's removed from any character arc, let's say Zubul starts hating the color pink. If that was a new development that occurred in her human brain, that information would be sent to the mind file and thus make Kane's design outdated, which is something I think he'd account for if he truly made this system perfect. But no, I think he asserts that he made a perfect program for their bodies because their mind files are based on scans that are one and done. The body generator thingy rolls with what it's got, but enough of trying to be super logical as a way to poke holes in an argument that's trying to be super logical as a way to poke holes in a theory. Let me just keep things a buck. This show has proven within these last few episodes that while yes, we may be prone to some animation errors here and there like any other cartoon, so much of that imagery and dialogue is intentional. What's said and what isn't said. Having Kane refer to their perceived consciousness as files feels very deliberate. Kane already acknowledges the gang as humans. Hell, he lets it rip of a hard H during his crash out. He both admires and envies humanity. So if their minds were really still there and just linked to the circus through files, I think he would have just said that his program perfectly encapsulates their minds or consciousness. Not to mention, it's very telling that despite talking about all of this behind closed doors, Kane never actually says anything about them being able to leave the circus. He never says anything along the lines of, if they find a way out, I'm cooked. All he says is that they craved something real, they wanted an exit, so he gave them an adventure that covers all that. You can tell he's genuinely confused about their dissatisfaction when he tried to deliver exactly what they asked for, and I feel like that wouldn't be the case if he was actually keeping them in the circus against their will. He doesn't ask, surely they don't want to leave this place. He questions if they want to leave him. Oh, even Bubble doesn't say anything that implies going back to the real world is a possibility. He just says,
they'd rather abstract than go on your adventures.
Which once again, no one else is around. If leaving was an option, then he would have brought it up when trying to hit Kane where it hurts. All the other supporting evidence in this episode for the Soma Theory is found in the computer. Judging by the two AI modules that read consciousness research and brain scans, it seems as if Kane in his original state was tasked by someone at CNA to figure out how to transfer human consciousness to the virtual world, meaning it was probably never intended to be a game in the first place. And this someone at CNA is likely Scratch. Kane presumably came to the conclusion that brain scans would be the best bet at achieving this goal. To be blunt, I don't think their brains are being continually scanned in the real world. I think the situation is not that different from a real-world scanner. Let's take it back to the 2000s. You take a really nice photo on a camera at a party, you get it developed, but now you want to post it on MySpace or something. You scan it. Now it exists forever in digital form. Even if something happens to that photo in the real world, it'll continue to exist as a conglomerate of pixels. You see the vision? We also have the character folder that has 2 additional folders inside it, labeled AI, presumably the NPCs, and Kane-enabled neural scans, which are marked obsolete. I imagine since it's specified Kane-enable, it's marked as obsolete because it's referring to the developer team that created Kane and the Circus, who all seem to enter the Circus with Scratch. Though that begs the question of where the likes of Pomni, Jax, and everyone else are stored. Are they with the other AI?
In this mystery file, that may be the program Kane was talking about.
Kinger seems pretty surprised to find the neural scans in this folder, and it's probably because he's forgotten how CNA got everyone into the circus in the first place and why it happened. Something he used to remember at some point, as he and Queenie seemed as if they were about to say something along the lines of, "I just hope Blank's okay in the real world," or maybe even, "I just hope they survive the scans." Blank being whatever their real names are, with the current consensus being that Kinger's real name is Grant. I also find it interesting that the brain scans would be in the character folders at all, because once again, if these were just avatars for the players as their minds remain in the real world, wouldn't they be in their own folder marked avatars or something? I could be reading too much or too little into that, but it does strike me as very odd. It also oddly vindicates the philosophy Jax uses to cope with, even though he's still wrong in the long run.
Usually rabbit, gaslighting with kids.
Now, my skepticism towards the headsets and why I suspect the brain scans may be killing the humans in the process, or that they already might be marked for death, really boils down to one thing: the laser warning. Lasers being involved with brain scanning technology isn't unheard of. In fact, it seems like it's being leaned on more as technology advances over time. What concerns me is that a laser warning is not only for laser radiation, but it advises people to not stare into the beam or view directly with optical instruments. You're supposed to avoid eye exposure, use some protective eyewear, yada yada yada. So why the hell is this symbol on a device that is the eyewear? It is the optical instrument. We can assume it does beam lasers into one's eyes, running the risk of retina damage, and who knows what else with this technology. It just seems to be very high risk, and I can't imagine someone being hooked up to this thing for years on end. What, so they can go back to the real world blind? It must be designed as a quick and easy process. Hell, I can't even imagine someone putting this on unless they understood the risk and really wanted their brain scanned into the circus for one reason or another. There's also a chance that the headset might just obliterate your brain as it gets scanned into the digital world. For all we know, these headsets may have never even made it to market, but ended up being sold under the table. Or maybe the headsets were stolen, distributed all around the world. Who knows who else is waiting to be beamed into the circus? It really comes across as a nothing left to lose kind of move. Something you opt for when you already know your time in the real world is almost up. Which brings me back to Scratch and his greatest desire. The reason why he created Kane and the Circus. Being the first abstraction, one of Kane's creators, and suffering from a brain tumor, the digital copy theory is the glue that ties everything we know about Scratch together. However, I sincerely believe that the idea of this place being the amazing digital purgatory strengthens both the digital copy theory and Scratch as a character. Judging by the existence of Kane and how Kinger talks about Scratch, we can assume he was a super smart guy. But as it usually goes with geniuses, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a complex and an ego. I'm not saying he was an asshole or anything, but stories love to show how intellect doesn't always correlate with emotional maturity or just being immune to regular human emotions. It's in our nature to survive, so if you're over here living that Jimmy Neutron life, you're probably going to want to find a way to conquer death when on borrowed time. It tracks all too well that Scratch created the circus as an afterlife and as a means to preserve his mind before his tumor can cause any cognitive impairment, if it hadn't already, and he wanted to share this gift with anyone else whose life was cut short due to circumstance. Whether that be an illness, murder, or a freak accident. We still don't even know what CNA as a company was really up to. Even if Scratch was pursuing digital consciousness for his own immortality, what products and services could the company have possibly been providing for that to get the green light? I know this is going to sound silly, and I'm not putting all my stock into this part, but what if CNA doesn't stand for Kane and Abel, but Kane and Abel?
But why?
Making software and products for the healthcare industry, with the headsets and Circus being the company's magnum opus. Or at least, it was intended to be. A service that could help those whose life is being cut short or is at least at a crossroads. Their physical body isn't long for the world, but their brains are still active. So if they're unable to recover, they can continue to exist in this virtual world. To take it a step further, since that opens the door for scenarios where patients wouldn't be able to consent to this, what if the procedure is decided by someone else? Family, guardians, and emergency contact. That their inability to let go of their loved ones drives them to throw them into the Lyoko and watch their consciousness exist from afar. Yes, that would imply the circus is sort of a TV show in universe, though the audience is restricted to the grieving. Look, little Billy isn't stuck in a vegetative state. He's right there, living his best life as Blorko. Might sound ridiculous, but hey, I'm not the one who made the thumbnail for episode 8's trailer in homage to The Truman Show, so blame Glitch for letting me spin that as foreshadowing and planting the thought in my head in the first place. Okay, so even if that all added up, why'd Scratch abstract if he got what he wanted? The German dub even reveals that when he arrived in the circus, he was asking about a way to leave. What's up with that? Well, I think it's the result of an existential crisis. Since Scratch presumably knew as much about the circus as Kinger does, it tracks that he would have tried to conjure an exit using admin controls or whatever you want to call this ability, since all of the characters are capable of tapping into it. It's also something Pomni seemed to have pulled off subconsciously in the first episode. But after Scratch went through the endless loop of doors until he found himself in the void, he realized there was no feasible way out and began contemplating his own existence, coming to terms with the fact that in his efforts to extend his own life, he just ended up creating more life instead. Life that didn't ask to be created. And as if that wasn't enough, he has to carry the guilt of dragging his whole team into this world and dooming them all to this dreadful fate. He never considered the impact that being a digital copy would have on said copy. Despite having the memories of someone who put on the headset, he may no longer be that person. He's Scratch, an identity that's detached from who he was in the Macroverse. Because of that, he's not really sure who he is or what his purpose is. And being unable to leave this realm to verify the situation for himself broke him. Okay, so I think I've made solid arguments for the humans being digital copies, the headsets definitely being sketchy, if not downright lethal, and that Scratch designed this place as a means to escape death, wanting to preserve his mind so he wouldn't have to worry about his physical body keeping up. So let's finally talk about our main characters. If the circus was intended for those who had their life cut short or drastically changed due to an incident, what brought them all here? This brings us back to the end of episode 8 and Kane throwing everyone's fears, anxieties, and traumas back at them. We don't know how exaggerated these scenes are, but I do believe that every single one incorporates a real incident, something that actually happened to these characters. It wouldn't add up to me if only Pomni's and Gango's moments were pulled from haunting memories, while everything else is abstract, you know? Plus, all the way back in 2023, someone asked Gooseworks on Tumblr if other characters endured some sort of physical trauma similar to Ragatha's eye trauma, to which Gooseworks answered, "Oh yeah!" It's hard to deny that at least some of these characters have been harmed in some way, and that this sequence featuring those instances makes a ton of sense. So I will make an argument for all these scenes insinuating some sort of physical harm, injury, or death, which naturally means we're gonna get a little dark in subject matter, so fair warning. Not to get all wacky dog on y'all, but if any of this is too much to handle, I'd advise jumping to this timestamp. Ragatha is pretty straightforward. She got stabbed in the eye. There's been a ton of implications that her mom was abusive. And I mean, come on, Ragatha's a ragdoll. And while I'm well aware that her mother's silhouette throwing knives at her can be read as figurative, laying on the metaphor that words are like knives, I think it's likely that the knives here have a double meaning. Yes, they do represent the verbal abuse from Ragatha's mother. I don't think the rest of the dolls at this table embody dead siblings or anything. That might be a little too extra. At most, she does have other siblings that have been abused, but she's the one where her mother took it too far. Ragatha getting stabbed through the hand, and especially the eye, didn't just feel like a metaphor. I know a lot of people interpret her button as a black eye, given that it's a dark blue, but I think it's just as viable that this button could be akin to an eye patch, and it's dark blue to go with the rest of her color scheme. If these bodies are supposed to perfectly encapsulate their mind files, what makes more sense? For Ragatha to lose an eye in the virtual world because one was bruised, or for her to only have one eye because she already lost her other eye when she put on the headset? Okay, I'll be real, it's fair to believe in either or, but I'm putting my bets on the latter. This would mean Ragatha suffered from a transorbital stab injury, which can cause brain damage. barrage, the extent of which may have led Ragatha to the digital world, if recovery was looking unlikely. Now I know Ragatha mentioned she worked in real estate, and the flashback in episode 8 implies she was surrounded by people when she put on the headset, so it's entirely possible she was involved with trying to sell the CNA building when a colleague talked her into messing with things that were better off alone. And I could totally see things playing out like that. I want to pitch an alternative though. What if Ragatha was stabbed in the eye by her mother, causing brain damage in the process, and ultimately, instead of trying to aid any sort of recovery, her mom or a different family member opted for the digital upload, luring in a dazed and confused Ragatha who had no idea what was going on. She was just told that putting this thing on would help her head feel better, hence her calling out for people when she arrives in the circus, letting them know she put the headset on. She may not have known what was going to happen, but those around her did. That's actually a common theme with this theory. I don't think anyone ended up in the circus willingly. They were either tricked into putting on the headset, were toying around with it out of morbid curiosity, or had it placed onto them when they were unconscious. It feeds into the dilemma that as digital copies, they never asked to be made. Their IRL counterparts never even wanted to indulge in this place. Back on track, maybe Ragatha's brain damage left her unable to speak, so although it looks like she was having a conversation when she spawned into the circus, she could have just been saying what she wanted to physically convey, but couldn't. Either way, her brain and body started to disconnect, and her mind found itself in a whole new world with a whole new identity, but with familiar scars. Ooh, the last part was ad-libbed. Can you guys tell? I smoked that shit. Gangle's trauma is also pretty blunt. She got hit by a truck unexpectedly. I mean, come on. Come on. Gangle managed to hold on long enough to have her brain scanned into the circus, but due to the fact it was a whole ass truck, she either went comatose or died instantly. With medics trying to bring her back to life, and amongst the pandemonium, the decisive decision was made to put on the headset. Again, assuming these headsets don't just melt their brains on the spot. It seems like Jax and Zubal's fates may have been more intense. And to avoid demonetization, the team behind the show had to beat around the bush while still delivering something that's genuinely upsetting to watch. For Jax, I'ma be real, I still think he got into a car accident that put him in a coma where his brain was scanned shortly after. But I still got an extremely depressing interpretation of this moment, so you know I'm gonna go for it. It's obvious Jax is afraid of his true self being seen, but what if there's more to this moment? Being stripped down and mocked by his friends felt very specific, especially with the way he pulls up the purple fur on his shoulder and covers himself up. Once again, I'm thinking this represents more than one thing. It's symbolic, but it's also harkening back to a real life event for Jax. I think that Jax might have been publicly humiliated and assaulted for trying to present as his true self, or trying way too hard to be someone he wasn't, swinging hard in the other direction, only for the crowd he's seeking validation from to see right through his facade and tear him down, with his friends joining in and indulging on his suffering. Sure, it reads as this being his deepest fear before anything else because we see Pomni, Kakmo, and Ribbit laughing at him, and we know at the very least Pomni would never do that. Yet, take into account everything we know, how these three seem to be the closest anyone's gotten to Jax in the circus. I believe they're substituting people from Jax's life back home, people that he thought were his friends and that he deeply trusted. When it comes to character arcs, Jax is definitely reheating Lars's nachos in the sense that he's repressing parts of himself and putting on a facade in order to keep up appearances and fit into the status quo. A status quo that in the circus he's enforcing, or at least was, but in real life might have been forced onto him, society and whatnot. There's a lot of readings of Jax's insecurities that wouldn't surprise me if they turned out to be true, like the trans Jax theory. It's something that feels just as, if not more likely than the digital copy theory as the show progresses. But at the very least, we can say Jax likes girly things and doesn't want to own up to it. He'd rather come across as the snarky social outcast. Once again, reheating Lars's nachos. They say purple is the new pink. Since Jax is 22, which is college age, it's possible there was some sort of social outing where Jax tried to be open and honest about himself, maybe wearing a dress or other feminine clothing. Alternatively, he could have been trying to double down on being super macho, trying to rock a tough guy fit that wasn't his style and it showed. Either way, he was baking on confidence, triumphing everything. It didn't work out for him. His friends betrayed him and joined in on tearing Jax down as he was being attacked, having the clothing he worked up so much courage to wear torn off of him. Maybe he was a part of a frat and they didn't respond well to his true self at all. Maybe he was an ordinary party gone awry, given what we've been shown. Either way, Jax got messed up, driving home recklessly as he was in absolute shambles, unfortunately leading to an accident that put him on life support and forced into the virtual world. Then there's Zubal. This one could definitely be a reach as this can be strictly read as one thing, them being suffocated by their body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria, but once again, it could carry darker implications that required the show to only imply what happened instead of outright showing it. We know Zubul worked as a bartender. There's someone who knows their way around a bottle. And with that knowledge, it felt like Jax was trying to imply that Zubul's the type to become an alcoholic.
I like making drinks.
That sounds fitting for you.
I know there's an implication there, but I can't be to figure it out.
And while in that moment Jax was definitely trying to be a dick, with his knack for being right and wrong at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if the validity of this accusation wasn't purposely kept ambiguous for a future revelation. I wouldn't think too much of it if we didn't have this imagery of Zubul getting smothered by their own body. It makes me think that not only did they feel suffocated by their body, but maybe they had a self-destructive habit of trying to drown their sorrows with alcohol, only for it to backfire as they inadvertently drowned themselves, drinking to death and choking in their sleep. Alcohol overdose is another thing that can lead to brain damage, so if Zubul was found in time and taken to a hospital, even if they were saved, they weren't able to walk away unscathed, demanding medical attention at the very least, and next thing they know, Zubul's in the circus. Finally, there's Pomni. I do want to put out there that I'm also on board with the idea that Pomni could secretly be the third CNA AI after Kane and Abel, so that may explain why Pomni's trauma is related to gummy goo and NPCs as opposed to a real-world event, though it could also illustrate that she just didn't have much baggage in the real world. But that doesn't mean there isn't any implied death in this scene. In fact, I think they showed us how Pomni died. The trauma train kicks off with her getting electrocuted, struck right on top of the dome by lightning. You know, where the headset is. With the implications that Pomni ended up in the circus because she explored the abandoned CNA building and put on a headset, I think something went wrong when booting it up, and well, she got fried like chicken, son. Or maybe this is just what happens to everyone who puts on the headset. Regardless, her mind got uploaded while her body perished. Also, guess what electrocution can cause? I don't know. All of these things potentially leading to brain damage, while Scratch himself also dealt with something in his brain, on top of the headset scanning your brain, really doesn't feel like a coincidence. But given that none of this is explicitly stated in the show, and I'm just speculating, writing near fanfiction, I'm willing to accept that I might just be seeing things that aren't really there. The only person who may not be dead, if the brain scan itself doesn't kill you, is Kinger, which it would be nice to know that the real Kinger and Queenie are out there somewhere living their best lives. Or maybe he died at some point offline, since the circus has existed for 30 years. Everyone else, though, definitely super dead. And I think the idea of the circus intentionally being a final resting place, a way to achieve immortality and run away from the hardships of the world, would recontextualize everything about Kane, the missing piece of the puzzle that explains why he was so oblivious to everyone's unhappiness for so long.
Don't they get that I'm trying? I can solve any problem. I can solve this one. That's what this is. A big puzzle that I need to solve.
Kane is just doing his job. From the rules he set in place to the adventures he schemes up, he's just trying to provide the most comfortable and engaging afterlife that he can think of for the humans. That's where his god complex really stems from, because he really is acting as their god by design. It's not something he asked for, but it's what he was programmed to do. His vision just has abysmal execution, probably because he's doing all this without Abel, when I wouldn't be surprised if they were designed to work in tandem. And I do believe all the rules were his ideas. No one can swear in the circus because the technology in this realm was intended to be used on and for all ages. Plus, if it really is a Truman Show situation, there could be a meta aspect where he doesn't want any kids watching their virtual relative or friend to get exposed to any profanity, and he's blocked out the cast's original names from their memories because he wants them to treat the circus less of a purgatory for the people they used to be and more of a reincarnation. It's a fresh start, where they still retain everything that makes them special, but they don't have to be weighed down by their baggage in the Macroverse. It's why he calls them characters while recognizing they're humans. They're based off who they were in the real world. They're still very much those people in a lot of ways, but at the same time, there's something different. These people have been reborn as Tumblr OCs. Whether they're his OCs or their OCs is up for you to decide. Kang doesn't want the gang to try and find a way out unless it's an adventure that he designed, because he witnessed Scratch abstracting from trying to find a way out and going insane, which is why in the pilot, he vehemently denies the existence of the exit that Pomni conjured up. There's a solid chance that Kane wasn't even aware that humans didn't even know that they were, copies, and that they may even be dead in the real world. Again, with how confused he seemed over everyone's dissatisfaction, and the fact that Kinger really seems to have a sweet spot for him, it definitely feels like there's a big chunk of context that humans don't have that would cause everything to click into place. The fact that he feels tortured by everyone because he can't understand why they're unhappy communicates to me that Kane really is as trapped as they are. If he had the ability to set them free, he would have when he hit his breaking point. Even when it's just him and Bubble, he never laments the possibility of them leaving the circus. That means something. I also believe Kane may not even recognize that their physical bodies ceasing to exist means that they're dead. After all, he still addresses them as humans, which makes perfect sense. His communication and interactions with humans have only been through the circus and the computer, being fed prompts and chatting through command logs. To Kane, what makes someone human is their mind and how it works. After all, that's where their knowledge, personality, wants, and needs are. His brain works differently than humans, as is the case with the rest of the AI. He truly admires them and their ability to create, but he's also envious of them. He doesn't see the world how they do. Even though the irony is, once you put humans and fictional characters on the same playing field, you realize they aren't so different after all.
I wanted to be able to leave my mark somewhere in the world. How am I supposed to just abandon that?
You've made a mark in my life.
Let's say all of this is true. What is the point of the amazing Digital Circus? How would any of this enhance the story and not just be a curveball to throw at the audience? Well, that's where Return to Kuz works his thesis on the series. The takeaway she wants people to have with Digital Circus is that there's meaning in a stagnant life. Initially, this is why I hated the Soma Theory. I'm so used to stories where the fantasy land has to be left behind at the end so that the characters can return to reality. I definitely thought they were building up to a division between the circus where some people wanted to leave while others wanted to stay, especially once it was apparent that Jax was desperately avoiding leaving the circus at all cost. And I hated the idea that everything they've been fighting for was meaningless because they never had a shot at escaping. But now that we're barreling towards the end, I definitely see how the Soma Theory fits Goose's words better than anything else. And that I was looking at this scenario from the wrong point of view. The stagnant life isn't the boring 9-to-5s that await everyone. It isn't the quiet suburban town where not much happens. The stagnant life is the circus. Going on adventures every day, never aging, not needing to eat or sleep, but choosing to do so just to create a semblance of a routine. Never watching a movie or hearing a new album. Time stands still here. They just have to make do with their formulaic, episodic lifestyle. It's like watching cartoon characters come to terms with the fact that they're cartoon characters, but reaffirming that they're not any less real because of it. There are so many fictional characters in our lives that are real to us because we follow their emotional journeys, their highs, their lows. We get to know their personalities, their dreams, and their greatest fears. If characters didn't feel real to us, we wouldn't be fazed by their victories or losses. We wouldn't sob like babies when one of them kicks the bucket. Episode 2 is definitely meant to prime the audience for the impending reveal that they're copies through Gummy Goo. Despite being whipped up for this adventure, he has his own memories and values, things in his life that are worth protecting. He's not any less real than Pomni when it comes down to it. So why would Pomni or anyone else have their identity invalidated if it turned out they have no physical bodies to return to? The Soma Theory wouldn't render the Digital Circus null and void because it's not a story about getting back to where you came from. It's a story about accepting where you are now and moving forward instead of harping on the past, making the most of your circumstances and creating the life you want from them. I also definitely think there's commentary being made on online friendships and how virtual bonds are just as rock solid as those formed offline, face to face. In some cases, they can be stronger. People in your life that you interact with daily, but are online, may be words on the screen, a voice over Discord, or pixels on FaceTime, but they aren't just a digital consciousness. They're real human beings who have a real connection with you. And while it's amazing to be able to connect with them in real life, something that I've had the pleasure of experiencing a lot over the last 10 years, some of my friends that I met online are my neighbors now. Not everyone is going to have that luxury for one reason or another. So it's really sweet to have a show like this affirm to the audience that even if you can't dab up the homies in the flesh, your relationship isn't any less real. Themes and such, you know? With all that said, how do I see the series ending if this all shakes out? Easy! After everyone comes to terms with their situation and abstraction is resolved, or just stopping someone like Jax from abstracting, the gang decides to rebuild the circus, with everyone grabbing a hold of their ability to take control and create whatever they want, to take control of their reality. Though honestly, I'd be surprised if Kane wasn't restored or recreated by the end of the series to assist them, but I have a feeling that if that happens, he won't be alone. And if we're being real, I doubt most of them are going to be too torn up over the realization that their old lives are over. Like, no more abuse? No more being a wage slave? No more repressing who they are to please others? A hot dog! It's a little morbid, and I don't think that's an aspect of the story that's supposed to send a message to the viewer, as not everything in a story is going to be therapy for us. Parting ways with their past lives and not wanting to make the mistakes they made in the Macroverse. To weigh them down any further, the circus gang opts to reinvent themselves, potentially even tweaking their designs, and they move forward, open, honest, and together, ending on the theme song roll call that this time goes uninterrupted without a hitch, until someone new shows up in the circus. But fret not, this time they're properly equipped to ease in this newcomer and show them how to make the most of this journey instead of trying to run away. I definitely think staying in the circus is set in stone at this point, after pondering throughout the suggestion in episode 8, but got derailed before the gang could continue that discussion. And I feel like that's not something you bring up as a writer unless you plan on it being addressed at the very end. But we still got a ways off until June when the finale arrives, so as always, take this all with a grain of salt.
But I really hope I'm right.
But as always, these are just my thoughts and I want to hear yours. What are your thoughts on the Soma Theory? Do you think everyone in Digital Circus could be dead, or is that a bit too much, man? Let us know in the comments down below and keep the conversation going by giving me a follow over on Twitter and Instagram at AllSharkVox and at RoundtableVids. Shout out to Jakey Bones for the amazing thumbnail. Support us over on Patreon if you want to support more long-form cartoon yapping. And if you enjoyed this video, please sort of like and subscribe to the Roundtable with notifications on so you never miss a video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. Peace!
What we do here is go back.
Need something to throw on while you draw, study, or sleep? Roundtable Rewind's got you covered. So why not take a stroll down memory lane and subscribe?
No one can tell me what to do.
See you there.